an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Jane the Virgin, Season 2, Episode 18, Chapter 40. No, Chapter 39. Sorry, everybody. In this episode, we have competing bachelor and bachelorette parties, which both go quite wrong for very different reasons. This was like a real lesson in anxiety. Guys, this was really hard to watch. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Lauren for commissioning this episode. Also, just want to mention, my husband found an abandoned kitten in a wheel well of a truck in this parking lot that he was working at. And she is currently here in my arms, having just been fed, vaguely stirring. I'm hoping that she will just be cool and take a nap. But if you hear some mews and commotion, that's her. She's extremely, for something so small, to be able to make the noise that she can make, it's really extraordinary. So, just wanted to head that off. All right, let's talk about this episode. The first thing that I want to talk about, the very first thing, is just let's get this Petra thing out of the way. What is happening? The look that Petra has on her face tells me that she does not know she has a sister. And my assumption is this actress is not a twin. This is her in a wig. I'm feeling like that's what's going on here. I have to think that if this is the case, they can't keep this up for that long, and that maybe this plot thread won't, like, the two of them being together won't last for very long because it'll be too difficult or awkward to film. But introducing another twin into the equation after, like, the fact that her lover had been a twin and nobody knew that, which it turns out, like, wasn't exactly as true. Well, it was, but you know what I'm saying. Like, the twin that we met was actually the guy. But all that set to the side, I can't help but laugh that they're bringing in another set of twins. I'm not mad at it, really. Like, there's a part of me that's almost like, nice. I love that we're doing this again so soon. Because it's just such a silly trope. It's a particularly, like, fun one because it's so silly. And with everything going on with Petra, I want there to be something that's got some levity to it for her sake. Going through postpartum is, like, it's rough to go through. It's rough to watch her go through the doubts that she is having. And if we can introduce this sort of zany element that keeps her from just, like, packing up and abandoning her kids because of self-loathing, I welcome it. So that's where I stand on Petra, and that's all I'm going to say about that. So next, I'm going to talk about Michael's bachelor party. And it's fun. We get a reminder of the fact that he met Jane because she was, like, making noise from her birthday party. And when he got to her house, she thought he was a stripper. I had forgotten that whole little thing. And we have a moment that we didn't see the first time. After he leaves, after their first kiss, he knocks on the door, and she thinks it's just because he couldn't stand to be away from her. But he's like, well, one of your friends is out here drunk and passed out. And it turns out it's not a friend, it's Xiomara. And that is Michael's introduction to Jane's mother. So that's Michael, like, and just a refresher on him. But then it turns out that, like, he's trying to set up his bachelor party. And even though he checks with Jane about if she's okay with strippers, she says she is at first. But then she's like, you know what, fine, no strippers. And she just is kind of honest about how she feels, which I think is fair. But it's clear he still wants to go out and have like a raucous night, which is fine. He, unfortunately, mentions this within hearing of Rogelio. And Rogelio is very hurt that he didn't get an invitation. Michael clearly didn't invite him on purpose, but in the moment feels too guilty and tells him, of course, he's welcome to come. And Rogelio does what he do, which is takes complete control of the event and overplans it. Now, I would just like to state for the record that this sounds to me like an absolutely spectacular evening. I mean, it's this flawless table setting, wine pairings that he has done meticulously for each course, that his private chef cooked 5 courses, and then like an all afternoon spa treatment series. It just does not get better than that. I'm sorry, it doesn't. And I was very relieved when things wrap up with Michael trying to be like, all right, guys, let's get out of here. And his friends being like, actually, massages sound really good. I was like, yeah, look, I get that you guys aren't getting the night that you thought you were getting, but I can't respect you like giving each other looks and whining when you are being pampered like this for free. It's just, I was having a hard time being like, oh, this is awkward. You know what I mean? The main issue at hand here is the fact that Michael feels really weird about the dynamic between him and Rogelio in a setting that isn't surrounded by family, because they are going to be actual family soon. And navigating that is a little challenging. And this is something that I think about a lot. I never had like bachelor parties. I got married twice. The first time it was so sad. I went out and nobody like was able to stay because everybody had to work at the ass crack of dawn. And so I thought we were going to a club, and we went and had like dinner, and we were supposed to move from there to the club, and everybody bailed because everybody thought they were the only one that was going to bail and that the others would still be there. So it was literally like me and one other person. And I just decided to go home, and I was so bummed. And then when I got married the second time, I was planning a whole like karaoke night out, but the travel and the parks during the day, going to like the amusement parks, had worn us out so bad that I finally was just like, can we just stay home? And everybody's like, yes. Oh my God. Thank God. I really was not up for it. And so that one, I still wound up having a really fun night. We got very drunk and stoned in the Airbnb playing Jackbox, and it was great. But it was not what I had been thinking I wanted as like a perfect bachelorette, which was much more a traditional go out to the club and just get blitzed and have fun kind of thing. And the fact that these guys like had expected that, and they get curved the way they do, totally get how that would really, really throw you off. Like, you come into a situation with a certain outfit, with a certain energy, you've maybe pre-gamed and everything before you got there, and then you walk in and this man has his chef and light music and low lighting, and you're just like, oh no, now you've got to completely change gears. I am somebody who needs a plan at all times and doesn't like when shit gets changed up on me. It really fucks me up. So in that respect, I can understand how they were feeling. But then once you know that you're on this ride, fucking get in and enjoy it. Because that is like, he must have blown thousands and thousands of dollars for this bachelor party. Just, guys, live a little, you know? You can still go and get trashed later. That'll always be there. But the situation really winds up like, one of Michael's friends starts to tell a story about how they went down to the Redneck Riviera. I'm going to look this up actually, because I had meant to, and I forgot. Redneck Riviera. Nashville, Tennessee. Oh no, well, is that what they mean? Because there's Redneck Riviera Resort and Ranch. Oh, but that's in Oklahoma. Oh no, okay, so on the Wikipedias, it's telling me the area and particularly the beaches along the Emerald Coast from Pensacola to Panama City, also referred to as the Redneck Riviera, alluding to the strong southern culture of the hinterland. Hinterland is such a good word. Okay, so that makes a lot more sense, because I was like, Tennessee, why would they have gone all the way there? But yeah, it's Florida, the Panhandle. So this story his friend brings up, he starts to tell it. It's clearly going to be something about a stripper whose name was also Jane, as it turns out. And Michael manages to cut his friend off before continuing into the story. But later on, when he sort of brings up that this was something he felt was inappropriate for Rogelio to hear, Rogelio doesn't get it. And it's like, well, what do you mean? And so Michael starts to tell the story, and Rogelio, I was surprised at how strongly he reacted that he didn't want to hear. Honestly, it feels a little immature to me. I'm curious what you guys felt about this. It's also difficult for me to understand because I don't have a child, so that kind of relationship where you are watching your kid get married and grow up, and you're aware that they're a full adult, but also you're protective of them and want to pretend the person they're with is probably pure as the driven snow. I get this not being the ideal thing, but you also need to be honest with the fact that your child's marrying a real person who has done things. And I was just taken off guard by how vehemently Rogelio says that he doesn't want to hear this story. I really didn't expect him to be, he was almost prudish about it, and that's not really the right word, but you know what I'm saying. And part of me was also, and this is a very steeped in the patriarchy kind of thing, but I have heard some really rough bachelor party stories. If you are friendly with sex workers and they do these kinds of jobs where they go on, they strip in clubs or they go to people's homes to strip for special occasions, they will have probably some pretty harrowing shit to tell you sometimes if you want to hear it. And I had a friend of mine who saw the father of the bride pay a hooker to suck off the groom and everybody was watching it happen. So when I say that this dynamic that Michael is worried about is not universal, I mean that in a very extreme way. When I bring up patriarchy, I mean it in terms of the weird, and they say this a few times in this episode, the weird, approach that we have to bachelor parties of this is your last night of freedom. Until you actually have the ring on your finger, you are not expected to be faithful, and that it's probably going to be a night that you have your last fling with somebody. And I'm not saying that even the majority of people think that anymore, but there was a certain expectation of this behavior for a pretty good period. And I really love the fact that Rogelio does not want to be part of that or encourage that. I like that he is our wholesome cinnamon bun. So I don't want to sound like I'm complaining here, but I do just want to acknowledge that men enable other men's bad behavior, no matter what the family dynamic, a lot of the time, a lot more than I think we want to realize, because we wish the men in our lives were better. If that, and I don't know, I only heard about what happened at the party. I never heard if the bride found out, but if she had found out that not only her future husband had gotten a blowjob from a stripper the night before their wedding, but then found out her father had paid for it, can you imagine what that would do to you? I just, it boggles my mind. And that sort of like enabling of absolute garbage misogyny is very real. It is why this structure still exists today. If everybody were just like, no, yes, we all agree that's wrong, then there wouldn't be a fucking problem. But here we are. So, I'm sorry guys if you can see this kitten. She's being quiet, which is good. But, I don't think she's showing up on camera. She's occasionally a paw is coming up. But she's just sort of rolling around over here in my arms. So, okay. Eventually they come to like the conclusion that there does need to be a bit of a divide socially, and he's glad that things worked out tonight. They're going to stay and they're going to do their massages and everything, but that Rogelio can't be part of certain things in Michael's life in the same way now that Michael is going to be Jean's husband. And I respect that they both come to this conclusion. I feel like I don't think it feels totally necessary. Like, I'm not sure it's really true to their characters. I'm going to be honest, because the two of them connected so much that I feel that the stories that would come out about Michael are probably not even that bad. Like, I don't know. It just, to me, what I see here is the writers finding a way to put a screen up between Michael and Rogelio so that eventually if something happens and Michael can't tell Rogelio, it'll feel like there's a good reason why he didn't. It feels like we're sort of anticipating needing drama. And so we're going to put this like barrier in place that otherwise I would assume wasn't even there. That's just the way it looks for me. But I may be reading way too much into it. I don't know. So let's back up and talk then about Jane's party. So first off, Jane is like planning her own party. And she is as meticulous as ever. And as she's walking out the door, telling them about like how she wants to have dinner, and she's like, thank you guys so much for having my back and just letting me have the bachelorette that I want. And both her mother and Lena shove her out the door and then look at each other and say, do you think that she suspects anything? Definitely not. Now, it was really interesting to see Lena and Xiomara right next to each other. They were wearing very, very similar outfits. They're both wearing short shorts. Xiomara's are denim. Lena's wearing these like sunflower ones, which are actually cute, but this weird beaded white top that does not go with it at all. Weird choice. And Xiomara has also got on a beaded top, but hers is orange. And they both have their hair down in these long, loose waves, and they're both wearing chunky heels, and they both have long, tanned legs. They just really do sort of reflect one another. So I should have realized then that this show is kind of going to do a parallel between the two of them. But the thing that winds up happening caught me off guard because Lena has been sort of a nothing character, as we have mentioned. And I just didn't expect that we were going to get anything of substance with her. And I don't think we are, to be honest. I think it was only inserted into this episode to sort of underscore things with Xiomara. I don't really expect that we're going to like pursue the story that strongly with Lena because the writers just don't seem to know what to do with her. So a part of me is like, is she just going to, eventually leave the Marbella and thus leave the show? It's tough because I feel like they could have made Lena a much stronger figure in Jane's life. I totally appreciate her family being her main thing, but I don't think it would have been impossible. I don't know. It's just a weird, it's something that they started that they didn't seem to know what to do with once they had it. But I really am curious about your reactions to the moment when they turn around and say, do you think she suspects anything? You guys, look, I get having some feelings of judgment about what your friends want. Oh my God, I get it. I can be very judgmental, and I can definitely think that I know what's best for people. But if somebody has repeatedly told you that they explicitly do not want this and that and this and that, and you just decide you're going to completely ignore their desires, that is shitty. That sucks. You know, it really does. Like, I wanted so much for this to turn out to be, maybe Jane does need to loosen up. And I think that in a way it does, but really Jane's fears are sort of underscored by the end of it and made to be really valid. And the way that it all shakes out. So Jane gets invited to be a speaker at an open, they're doing some sort of like, what do you call it? Orientation thing at her college, or like tours, open houses, whatever. And she gets a visit from her two stepsisters, or half sisters, I guess. Sorry guys, that's the kitten pawing at the mic. I'm getting her away from it. Sorry about that. I'm just trying to keep her happy so that she doesn't start mewing, because she's so loud when she does that. But when she gets this visit from these two, they are so effusive. Oh, it's so great to see you. But then it turns out they just want Jane to influence Rogelio into subsidizing their twins blog, Seeing Double. And they propose that he give them all the money he would have given them for college instead. And I just want to know, what the fuck are you doing with this blog that you need that kind of money? Sorry. Here, she's starting it. I'm sorry, everybody. I can't put her out with the cats, and this is the only room that we can keep the door closed on other than the bathroom, and I just really don't want her like in there alone. So that's why I have her in my office, and she's just full of piss and vinegar, as my mother would say. All right, girl, I'm going to put you on the floor, okay? Oh, she's purring, though. How can I put her on the floor? Can you guys hear that on the mic? I can't tell if you can, but all right, I'm just going to keep talking and petting her. So the speech that Jane is giving, she's asked to speak because somebody else dropped out, or they got sick, and she is interrupted by Don Quixote the Stripper, a book she had in her bag that evidently Lena was only pretending to not know what it was because they'd already booked the stripper. And he was supposed to come to Jane's office, but she wasn't there. So rather than just be like, I guess I'll wait for her in her office, a private space I was explicitly asked to go to, he thinks, what the hell? Why don't I bust into a room full of maybe minors as well as adults and do my shit in front of this huge crowd of people all running cameras? Which, to be fair, is such a bad call on his part that I don't see that anybody could ever have predicted he would do something like that. It's very foolish of him. But it was more foolish of Xiomara and Lena, because they knew that this is not what Jane wanted, and by sending somebody that they had just like paid money and been like, okay, here's what you're going to do, and let it go, there are so many like chancy factors involved in that. If you are going to explicitly go against Jane's wishes on a bunch of stuff, you have at least got to have your finger on the pulse at every moment so that you can be sure things aren't going horribly wrong. And they just don't do that. They just put things in motion and then they like hands off. And I was thinking that it was going to be this whole that they would sort of begin to take it back on the other stuff once they realize that, like, maybe there's a reason this isn't what Jane wanted. But instead, she comes out, she, like, yells at her mother for what she did, and then the fucking party bus rolls up, and it just has to be like, okay, well, can you also forgive this surprise? And Jane, it takes a minute, it takes a while for them to win her over, which I appreciated. Personally, I don't know if I could have done it. Like, they put so much money into it. That would be something that would weigh on my mind, I think. And they obviously planned. So there's effort there, but it's effort that's, like, completely misapplied. I asked for something specific and you did the opposite. So even if you did put effort in, do I owe you anything because of that? I don't think so. So eventually she's like, okay. And she starts drinking, and we have, like, the stages of Jane. And evidently there is this sort of alter ego that Lena describes as her Sasha Fierce, called Sweet Lady Jane. And we get this moment later, you guys, that was so good, where she pops up in this, like, platinum wig freestyle rapping. And it's, like, pretty good. I was watching and I was like, this is excruciating. Watching people freestyle rap is always embarrassing for me, even when they're good at it. But the way that it goes, it's like, I'm feeling it, and then all of a sudden the narrator's like, that's how it would have gone in her head, and then we get to see what she actually does, and she's just standing still and kind of going, "Ayo," and, like, really slowly, and, like, the rhymes are there, but sparsely peppered in, lots of thought between, like, it's very, very funny. I actually really did enjoy that, but that's a little bit later on. First, we've got to deal with what's going on with Lena. So I can't tell. I can't remember if she gets, like, some feedback from her stepsisters at the end of the episode that they have decided they are going to go to college, because I feel like they must have. But they're questioning Lena about her life and what it is she does. And there is nothing like younger people who have these ideals and goals asking you what it is you do, to make you sort of stop and, like, look at what you're doing with your life and question things. I am in a pretty dope position. I'm a podcaster. I watch TV and read books for work, share my opinion while petting a kitten on camera for work. Doesn't get much better than this. So when I run into these conversations, I always walk away feeling like, all right, you know what? I may, like, have some health issues, and I may be frustrated with the state of the world, but in some ways I've got it pretty good. But Lena is in this position where, oh my God. Okay, cat, you're going on the ground now. Sorry, bud. Sorry, she just clawed me right in the lip. That hurt so bad. But Lena is apparently trying to be like, I'm going to be a stylist. Had we heard this before? I can't remember. I'm not trying to be cute. I really don't recall if this was ever mentioned. I feel like it must have been, but God help me, I can't remember. And they start asking her, like, what she's doing to accomplish this. And she says something about how, like, well, celebrities are looking for people's opinions, and they say something like, do any celebrities want your opinion? And they just keep saying things that bring her up short and make her feel clearly like a loser. They ask about, like, if she went to college. She says no. They ask about if she's, like, got a boyfriend. She says no. All of these sort of standard accepted milestones that people put a ton of weight on. She hasn't done any of them and is really beginning to feel a way about it when it's all, like, written down in front of her. And I just want to stress, like, I didn't finish college. It wasn't for me. I think that I got out just in time before I really got myself into some debt that was fixing to be insane. I am not pretending that I knew that when I got out. I left college because I didn't know what I wanted to do. So it wasn't like some amazing foresight. It just worked out that way. So I don't really regret not finishing. I don't feel like not going to college makes you a loser. I don't feel like not having a boyfriend or getting married makes you a loser. I do think that there are people like Lena who don't seem to stop and think about where they are in their lives until other people ask about it, though. And I think that there is some value to having people just like bring things to mind for you to remind you that there are potentially, you set out to do some things and maybe you've lost sight of that because of a bunch of other silly, goofy shit that happened along the way. Like, Lena gets very distracted by men a lot, which is something that Xiomara also deals with. And personally, I get that. I've also have a big history of being distracted by men away from my goals and then looking up and being like, I can't believe I did that, and feeling really stupid. So I sympathize a lot. But I am also somebody who was constantly thinking about where I was headed in life. And this kind of conversation would never surprise me. It would never make me go, oh my God, I've really lost track of what's important to me. I always was very aware of what was important to me, which is part of why I left college. It was part of why the choices I made seemed to be so, I'm trying to think of the word here. Random isn't the word, but I was making choices that to a lot of people looked really flighty and irresponsible, but they were because I was so, like, I was always so careful about monitoring if I was heading in the direction that I wanted to be heading in, that I would drop things and change direction pretty quickly if I saw that I wasn't headed where I wanted to go. And a lot of people aren't willing to do that because they feel like if I get to a stable place in XYZ capacity, then I can begin to focus on ABC. But I was always somebody who was like, if I can't get ABC, XYZ is irrelevant. Like, I needed them to match up. And my life, my work, and what I care about had to dovetail. Not everybody is like that. Owen's not like that. You know, he can do his regular job during the day, and then he has his hobbies and the fun stuff he likes, and it's separate. And that's completely fine. He does not mind putting the time into a job that doesn't have greater meaning. But I need that. I really do. So I did get written off a lot as kind of being a flake, I think. And now that I have found what I'm doing, it's not surprising. Like, I am kind of a flake in some ways, to be honest. But sometimes the not really like having a clear path can make it look like you're totally unfocused. And for me, it was almost like I was so focused that I was like losing sight of making a path for myself. I was trying to find a path that already existed instead of making one, if that makes sense. Anyway, the whole thing with Lena it really got me thinking, because it's very clear what the show wants me to think about Lena is that she has sort of been just like, you know, sliding along through life. She's pretty, she's smart enough, she's bouncy and full of energy enough to get by at the job that she has, and she's making good enough money, and she's living in a good enough apartment, and everything is good enough to the point that she's kind of like reached complacency and forgotten that she wants more than this. And when it's pointed out to her that she's claiming she wants a thing but isn't making any actual moves to get it, she decides to stop and reevaluate. And we have her and Jane sitting down to make a list that is so adorable. I really can't. So I'm just the one thing I want to say about the situation with Lena is I love the fact that Jane doesn't offer up any judgment at all toward her. It could, you know, like, she could have said something kind of cutting, and she wouldn't. Like, I know Jane by now. She's not going to do that. But, you know, Jane has pointed some things out about her behavior in the past, and she could have been a little snarky about this, or, And instead she's just so supportive, sitting down and just being like, all right, well, let's talk this through and let's create like an action list, something simple, like 5 steps, And that is just the kind of support. Like, sometimes you just need another person to be like, okay, this is doable, and sit down with you and hash it out in a way that's really like honest and focused and treating a thing as if it is attainable, to remind you that it's something that can be worked toward, and not just a flight of fancy or some dream that's like a hypothetical that will just eventually fall into your lap. I really, big surprise. Jane decides to make a plan, and I like that. Of course, I'm very predictable. But, it's just really, considering how little Jane and Lena's friendship has meant to me as I've been watching this show, it was a nice moment of me being like, oh, okay, there's something, So the whole thing with Michael and Rogelio is reflected with Jane and Xiomara, because Jane, at her 21st birthday, finding her mother drunk outside, and she even tries to come on to Michael for a second before vomiting all over their little, like, porch area. What happens here is almost a copy of that. So there's this guy that Lena has had her eye on, and the whole thing with the party, first off, she decides to take Jane's phone away because she's like, oh, you're going to be checking your emails during your bachelorette. That's bullshit. And Jane, meanwhile, she's on the chopping block at work. She is potentially going to be fired for what Xiomara did. So the fact that Xiomara has the gall to take her phone away shocked me to my core, you guys. I can't imagine having done something that led to a person they're sitting there waiting to hear if they are going to be cut from their job, and you're the cause, and you start to get on them about being obsessed with looking at their phone. Oh my God. Like, literally, how dare you? Genuinely asking, how dare you? I was so disgusted, and I wanted Jane to like stick up for herself so much more. She gets a message that she didn't lose her job, but for some reason, and this doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but it's fine. Somehow her mother records an outgoing message to his box saying, he's such a dick, I thought I was going to have to hire a stripper to pull the pole out of his ass. And it sends. She's trying to delete it and she sends it. Once again, a fucking thing that Xiomara caused, and Jane has to spend half the night mopping up this mess. She winds up recruiting her half-sisters to help her get his phone and delete the message. These 2 girls also steal his wallet for reasons. I don't know what they're thinking, but they manage to delete the message. They jump onto the bus and drive away, and nobody finds out that they were involved in this thing. Thank God. But then, later on in the evening, when Jane has had her, I think it's before she has her chat with Lena that leads to the list. But it's later on in that night, the half-sisters come running up to Lena and say something about the guy whose name was Craig or something that she was into, the bartender they'd slept together 6 times, I think the narrator said. And she's like, I'm chasing him, but I don't want him to know. She walks out and finds Xiomara locking lips with this guy who's 15 years younger than her. And there's even a moment when Jane comes over to her mother at a club, and she's sitting in and amongst all these men, and she's saying, they don't believe I'm old enough to have a daughter in college. Tell them you're my daughter. This is one of those things that, having had a mother who also had me very young, I would run into a lot of people who just straight up did not believe my mother when she said that I was her daughter. Because I looked much older than I was pretty quickly. And my mother looked really amazing for her age. So combined, there were people who thought that we were a couple sometimes when we were together because we looked so close in age. And I have never, ever had my mother use that fact as like a, see how old I really am, but don't I look great? It's clear that she was always really flattered and gratified to get the compliment, but she never trotted me out in that kind of way. And it was super gross, Xiomara. Like, what are you doing? So what ends up happening is Jane yells at her mother saying, "You know why I'm such a control freak? It's because I grew up with you and you are completely out of control." And that makes sense to me. And she slams the door. Her mother goes back to the house, climbs into bed with her mom, saying that she screwed up. And I've got to say, Alba says basically, like, we'll talk about this in the morning, but she's got a sort of vibe about her that made me think she knew this was coming. And because, like, at the beginning when they're talking about who's coming to the bachelorette, she says, "I don't think it's appropriate for your grandmother to be at your bachelorette." And she tries to, like, say this to Xiomara, and Xiomara just waves her off and says, "Jane wants me there," but clearly hasn't asked Jane that. Or if she has, Jane lied, which she may have done. But I feel the way that Alba responded to Xiomara was somebody who knew that they were going to be faced with this version of Xiomara at the end of the night. That they were, like, waiting for her to come home shame-faced because she was going to do something stupid, you know? So Jane, and the way that she said this to her mom, for a moment I thought was, like, really, really harsh. And I was surprised. I wasn't even that mad because Jane is almost never real harsh. And so anytime she trots out that side of herself, I'm usually pretty here for it. But I was a little surprised. And then we get to see the apology thing. And this was so good. I loved this so much. Oh boy. If you've ever had a person in your life who has pulled something like this, there is no describing the feeling you have when you begin to realize they are telling you the same exact shit again. It's like you're caught in a nightmare when you start to piece together, oh my God, they're saying the same thing. I had this with my first husband, and there finally came a point where we were having like an identical conversation to one we had had 6 months earlier. And all of a sudden I was like, oh my God, nothing has changed. And he still doesn't get it. Oh my God, this is over. And it just suddenly hit me. It was like I had been punched. And Xiomara, she went and got some treat. She comes to the door, and it's intercut with the apology that she gave Jane the day after her 21st birthday. And she is trying to explain to Jane that all of these things happening in your life, they make me stop and think about where my life is going. And it makes me feel old and blah, blah, blah. Basically, all she's doing is making Jane's exciting moments and accomplishments about herself. She is proving herself to be really self-centered. She seems to be giving Jane the bachelorette party she would have wanted. She is doing everything she can to hang on to an idea of herself, despite not seeming to really want to be where she is in her life, which is an odd thing, right? Trying to sort of like recapture something that you used to have, but that didn't seem to lead you anywhere good. Why do you want it so much? Because I feel like in some ways that's all she seems to value about herself. And it's really a bummer, you know? Like, it's almost making me feel as if the fact that her and Rogelio broke up is ultimately a good thing, because she doesn't seem to really know who she is without a relationship involved. And I liked the fact that she was starting to put her career first. I almost feel like this is backsliding on her character a little bit. But it may also serve as another impetus for her to really get her shit together a little bit more. But yeah, so Jane delivers one of the most devastating insults I have ever heard and says, I don't want your apologies. You do this every time. At this point, you're a cautionary tale. That was what Lena said about her mother, and it really seemed to stop Jane dead in her tracks when Lena said it. But then she says it to her mother, and there's a look in her eyes that to me says she knows she maybe just went too far saying that. But she does say it, and she doesn't apologize, and she closes the door in her mother's face again. And I am honestly really proud of Jane for drawing this line in the sand, because she says, I don't want your apologies. I want you to grow up. Amen, sister. If you are somebody that grew up, I had a really strange situation growing up. I had a 2-parent household, and I had a father with a steady job and income, and they loved me and cared about me, and I know that. But my father didn't speak English very well, and it was hard for him to be a really big presence in my life in certain ways because of the barriers between us in communication. And then eventually he got really religious, and I just, couldn't connect with him on that level at all. I connected really well with my mother, but she was so young when she had me and went directly from an abusive household to married to a man at the age of 16 who was 12 years older than her and basically controlled her whole life. So I was in this strange household with a man who wanted total control over his family and be the head of house, but couldn't quite accomplish that because of the language barrier issues and things like that. And a woman who wanted to be taken care of, but also didn't want to be controlled. And this resulted in some real haywire shit happening. And me kind of having to manage stuff for myself much younger than I really should have had to. And being hyper aware of the situation between my parents and knowing that they needed to divorce. I knew when I was in 6th grade that this was not going to work. And they stayed together claiming it was for me. And all I wanted was for them to fucking break up because they were clearly both so unhappy. And I have grown up to be somebody who is really a control freak and who does not trust other people to do things, because I have been let down on that so many times by people who were supposed to have my back that I don't believe when folks say, don't worry, I'll take care of it anymore. Nobody has ever just taken care of it. It's never happened. And when I have let myself believe that they were taking care of it, I found out I was wrong and I was in a bad spot because of it. I had let my guard down trying to enjoy thinking somebody was on their shit. And then I wound up screwed because of it. And this is the sort of thing that I probably put myself in this position repeatedly for reasons that therapists can theorize on. But when you grew up with somebody who doesn't have their own shit together and who is seeming to just be sorting out their life kind of at the same time as you because they didn't get to start their life until you were old enough to function on your own, it's a very weird sensation because in a lot of ways you're in the same place, but they want to relate to you on that level when they are your parent, and it doesn't work and it's weird. And especially Xiomara does not, like my mother, she does not seem like she has many friends. My mother didn't have many. And so when she started, when my parents divorced and she started dating, she would talk to me about her boyfriends in a way that you should talk to your girlfriends. Not your daughter, but she didn't have anybody to confide in. And that's kind of what I'm getting from Xiomara as well. She doesn't have anywhere to sort of put that energy that's appropriate. And she is trying to like use her daughter's youth for her own ends in a weird way. So this just really hit for me because I really try not to blame my mother for the fact that she was young and didn't know what she was doing. She did her best. But there are a lot of times that I look back and I really feel angry that I had to like sweep the pieces up off the floor because she was too busy crying about how unfair everything is to do it for herself and for me. And so I had to do it for us both when I'm the fucking child. And it's a difficult thing to get over as you get older, and it begins to like matter even more that your parent has not reached a place where they're actually like stable. Because it sucks enough when you're a child and you have to do this. But when you're older and you're trying to build your own life, and then your parents' life keeps sort of like falling apart, and you're watching it wondering like, if this keeps up, what do I do? Am I expected to like step in and help do something? And she would be in this situation. It's like you start to just get really resentful. And I am just glad in my selfish way that my mother found somebody, got married, and that she's with a person who has a steady job, who is reliable, who really, really cares about her. And I feel like at least there is somebody looking out for her, because I just don't trust her to take care of herself. And if he weren't in her life, I would feel like it was on me. So the situation that Jane is in, and the fact that she's still like sharing this house with her mother and grandmother because her mother hasn't gone off on her own and really tried to live because she's scared of failure, maybe. She's got to really get the rug pulled out from under her. I feel like Jane's saying you're a cautionary tale. It's like, it's truly so harsh, but I don't know if it's not the thing that she should have heard. I feel like she goes back and tells her mother what Jane said, and Alba's just going to be like, well, you know, Alba admittedly is too judgmental. And that's part of where Xiomara's like, she is so defiant that I think that has influenced her to doing shitty things just to piss her mom off and show her I can do what I want. But at the same time, there is some common sense in the way that Alba looks at things that Xiomara just does not want to admit and doesn't want to see. So that the two of them, like, I'm really interested to see where this goes, because the dynamic between them is so loaded, and I don't want this to just be the two of them next episode make up by the end of it. I kind of want Jane to draw a bit of a boundary here and ask her mother to, like, get back to me when you have gotten your shit together a little bit more. I don't even know what that really looks like. So when I say that, I don't have like a benchmark in mind that would indicate this. But I just feel like trying to say, I said some things, you said some things, let's move on. That's not really addressing the real problem here, which is really a long-running issue. And something that clearly Xiomara had no idea was an issue for Jane, because she assumed Jane wanted her at her bachelorette when that is the opposite of what Jane wanted. And I will say that I thought what was going to happen, because like there's a point where some phones got forgotten and Xiomara has to go back and get them. I thought Jane's phone was going to be in the mix, and that Xiomara would see the text that Michael sent Jane saying, you did want a night out like this, but just not with your mother there. And Jane replies with true. I thought we were going to have a whole thing where Xiomara like looks into her phone, sees this, and then they have a bit of a thing. And I kind of like that that's not what happened, because instead of it being that she was nosy and gets her feelings hurt, because whenever you read about something, if you listen in on somebody talking about you in any sense, it's so rare that you're going to hear something good. Like, it's just a fact. So if she's going to be nosy and then get her feelings hurt, I couldn't really like care about that. But the fact that she gets caught like making out with this dude who's so young in the middle of like the hotel hallway, like it's just a display, that is much more satisfying. That is her own behavior, that she gets caught red-handed knowing that Lena is into this guy, and also, what are you trying to prove? And there's no way for her to deny her own actions the way that it would have been easy to do if she had just like read the text message. There's also this whole thing with Jane and Michael's vows, and it turns out that when you're Catholic, you can't write your own vows, and what they had intended to do was write them and put them in the, like, what do you call it, program? I don't think I had programs for my wedding. I don't feel like I needed them. A Catholic wedding has to be really long, right? I've been to Catholic funerals, endless. I've been to Catholic masses, oh my God. I don't remember if I've been to a Catholic wedding. But I think that is so dumb. Look, I'm not trying to shit on people's faiths, but there are certain traditions within those faiths that I think we can all agree are fucking stupid sometimes. And the idea that you can't write your own vows is idiotic. Come on. Let people express their love the way they want. It's insane. So anyway, what they decide to do is they're going to read them to each other, or at least Michael is going to read his to Jane. And we don't get to hear what it is because it's only for her ears. And I love the fact that as he's reading this to her, he's wearing the Michael is getting married shirt with his own face on it that Rogelio got for all of them. And then on the back it says to Jane with an exclamation point and Jane's face. Oh God, you guys, that was beautiful. It's so, when he pulls those out, the reaction Michael has, oh man, so awkward. So the camera pulls out as he's reading it, and the narrator says, but just trust me on this, it was perfect. And it was really sweet. I liked this. It's funny because like people talk about writing their vows, and I'm somebody, I knew that if I started writing my vows too early, I was going to overthink the hell out of it. So I like made myself wait until it was literally like 1 a.m. the night before my wedding, and I hadn't written them. And I had Rashawn come in, and she helped me through writing them. And I remember when she left just kind of being like, is this too, like, did we leave it too late? Did we fuck up? And I was like, no, it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. And I wrote my vows down, and when it was time, mine was so much longer than Owen's, and it wasn't even that long, but it was just such a perfect encapsulation because we're very different people in some ways. So anyway, all this to say, I won't say I didn't put that much thought into my vows. I did, but I did not have drafts the way they do here. And I'm interested in whether or not y'all had that same sort of experience. So, okay, last plot thread we're going to talk about. Raphael and his brother, whose name I still can't remember, and honestly, I'm really not that bothered about. So Raphael is in this thing with Michael, trying to figure out, as the narrator puts it, the answer to the very nuanced question, is my brother a good guy or a bad guy? And what he asked like Michael to do was to ignore the fact that he didn't have a proper search warrant and go onto his brother's boat looking for anything he could find anyway. And Michael, we like the camera cuts away after he says that to him, but Michael, it turns out, doesn't like follow through with this, even though Raphael says, we both know that you aren't above breaking the rules. It doesn't they let you think by cutting away that Michael has agreed. And it turns out he didn't. So we get a message from Stanhope Investigations. I don't know who that is. Have we met Stanhope Investigations? They tell him Derek's boat was clean. The boat's GPS shows it was exactly where Derek said it was for the month in question. And Raphael is like gratified, it seems, but also I can't tell if he really totally believes this. It's like a weird moment of him like getting the news that he was hoping for, but he was already so sure that his brother was lying that he's having trouble reconciling that, I guess. So anyway, his brother comes out of his room and is getting dressed, and Raphael is like, hey, are you hungry? Let's get some food. I'll pull up a menu. He opens his phone and sees a transaction confirmation. And when he opens it, he says, apparently I bought stock last night and I made $5 million. And his brother is like, oh shit. Well, we better get our story straight. And he's like, wait, what do you mean? And his brother says, well, Brandon knew they had the patent before they announced it this morning, which is called insider trading. It's illegal. And he says, I'm sorry, I thought you knew. That's why I didn't want you to invest. Okay. That's what this is. I see. The way that we're playing it is I try to dissuade you from the thing to make it seem like I'm not involved. Because his friend, like, when we see them first meet, the first thing he tries to do is be like, hey, Raphael, want to invest in our thing? And Raphael's brother's like, man, stop it. Don't do that. Now it's just going to look like I'm after your money. It's weird. And Raphael tries to smooth it over because it's weird. It is. But this makes his brother look like that's like the opposite of what he's after. And I fully believe he egged him on. I don't know if he actually drugged him or if he just got him drunk, which I guess is drugging him technically. But this absolutely has to have been his plan all along. To get him in a position where he had leverage over him and could fuck him over. Better than even getting his money. Now you have an elbow on him so that he has to like be aware of you and take what you want into consideration unless you decide to turn on him. I mean, he set himself up pretty well. And yeah, by no means is this an accidental thing. And I have to assume Raphael realizes that like, I don't know. Part of me wonders if this even is his brother, but I have to assume that his background's been pretty thoroughly checked, and probably he is. It's a bad situation though. Like, Raphael, I don't know if you're playing, like, I feel like he's out of his depth. You know what I'm saying? I feel like he's trying to act like he can play with the big dogs, and you don't even know what a dog is. My guy, you've got money, but you don't really have like the savvy about a lot of it. And he just feels a bit of a babe in the woods. Even despite being so suspicious, it's still something feels very amateurish about Raphael and the way he handles all this. So anyway, I guess we'll see. I have got to wrap this episode up. But thank you again so much to everybody for listening. Thank you to Lauren for commissioning this one. I hope y'all are enjoying. And until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
was an Unspoiled Network podcast.